Good evening, everybody. My name is Eric Beckman with Beckman Technology Projects. I'm a co-organizer of the ITSMB meetup along with Bruno and Deepak. Tonight we're speaking with Jeffrey Uchida, a principal with CS Technology. Good evening.
Good evening. How are you?
Good. So it's going to be a pretty informal chat this evening. We just want to kind of get your idea of and your perspective on information technology with regard to small and medium-sized businesses and how that applies to your day-to-day at CS Technologies. Maybe we could start by you telling us about CS Technologies and your role with them.
Sure. The company is about 23 years old, and we started from cable design and building buildings and outfitting them for businesses. All the way to today, where we're working a lot more on IT transformation and advisory services. So that's really more of our focus today, in helping CIOs and CTOs, I'm going to say, unlock the value of their infrastructure and their environment and everything having to do with that. For me, I've been with the company actually 6 months, and I'm the principal, and I run one of the practices there that includes corporate workspace, end user technology, and also service management. So all the service management practices that cut through your data center and your end user environment.
Now, how does CS Technologies differentiate itself from other IT consultancies or managed service providers?
That's a good question. I think where we've been successful is focusing on clients' return on spend, because I think in a lot of cases they struggle a little bit because it's always about money, it's always about how much they have to save, it's always about productivity. And one of the things that we try and do is really look at their entire portfolio, their environment, and help them make a case on return on their spend. Because too often they get trapped in saying, we'll give you $1 and we expect you to save 50 cents. And so what we try and do is help them, make a case to get some funding, but also show the return over time. So really, get that business case made around how they are going to build value and capability for their business.
Is there a particular technique that CS Technologies employs to kind of drive that message?
Yeah, I would be lying if I'd said we didn't have a technique, but at the core of it, to me, is there's always assessing. There's always understanding really what a company is doing, depending on the scope of what you're working on. But for me, as you get past that, it's really around looking at doing some specialty services around that environment that I think others don't do. Example would be, when we look at facilities, we have some industry experts around facility management, facility remediations, and things like that. So we'll go in and do very comprehensive reporting against, Uptime Institute statistics and things like that. So that's an example of a part of our offering that we implore, especially when there's companies that have multiple data centers and environments, corporate buildings, and things like that around the world.
Now, what are some of the things that you're doing or implementing to improve the effectiveness of the IT services you're delivering to your clients?
Well, an example would be that one of the things we're doing is we're equally bullish on what we do with our internal IP and things like that as we do with the services for the clients. Example would be, we've built a platform. You might call it its own data warehouse, and we've realized that every client we go into, we do some of those same steps that we just talked about. Have to assess their environment, get some experts to look at what's there and not there. Look at it up and down from the process, organization, technology standpoint, not just, what are the assets. But then what do you do with that information? Too often that's collecting fragmented data. So how do you get it into one place to be able to more effectively come back with recommendations and things like that? So we built a platform and continuing to build that out to be able to intake that data, manage it, simulate their environment, ultimately take our client experience over time and be able to use that for financials, price per square foot, or end user cost per user, or whatever those metrics really are, in a quick, faster way than you would do it just doing it manually. So that's an example of one of the things that we are constantly building out to help get through those engagements faster with more quality data and information.
So what is, as far as your career to this point is concerned, and perhaps you could speak directly to an experience at CS Technologies, but what's one of the biggest challenges that you've faced in delivering the IT services that you provide, and how did you handle that or overcome that challenge?
Yeah, well, I'm probably going to jump outside of CS Technologies since I've been there 6 months.
Yeah.
And I can't say that my biggest challenge has come there yet. But I could tell you, I can give you an example of what I would say is one of the biggest challenges that I've had in my career. And that's when two things. When you get engaged in a very large project that's not going well. And secondly, when you're doing it and you're affecting 20,000 end users and you're changing their whole world, from their machines to their software to their applications, is an example of one that I got involved in and actually had to take over. That was the biggest challenge, and I'll tell you why that's the biggest challenge. Because it's like the car and changing the tires on the car when it's moving. You basically, anytime the culture of your organization is affected like that, that set of changes are the most difficult to work your way through. And when it's not going well, it's even more difficult. So writing that and getting that into a place that it could be delivered was probably the most challenging, because you're in the middle of changing things and you can't go backwards. So you really have to figure out how to get that through, and it takes a lot more than just switching out their technology. It's organizational. It's the whole change element of making a program successful, which is overlooked and forgotten a lot of times, I would say.
So you're saying that like the engineering of a solution is not nearly as big of a stumbling block when problems arise as the adoption of the solution.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, technology is sometimes complicated, but it's technology. So it's all about applying it for the right things and then implementing it. And the implementing part is what you said. Too often it's a company's culture that's the telltale sign for how fast or how well or how adaptive they will be to what you implement. It doesn't mean there's anything wrong with the solution. It just may mean that they're used to whatever they were doing and they really aren't going to change without some other methods applied that are sometimes outside of your project. So I think that's the challenge. Influencing other parts of the organization to include those elements in the program.
And how do you facilitate that as a consultant?
I think honestly, it's a lot of it is experience, but a lot of it is being able to understand at the beginning that you're not just trying to apply a change in technology. You're trying to apply different processes or change processes or things that ultimately are going to come back to the organization. So that comes back to setting up a project correctly in the first place. I mean, and especially a large program. If you don't have all of those stakeholders and people involved, and you don't have the understanding and buy-in to what those changes are going to be at the beginning, then you're going to probably run into that. It may not be at the end. It might be during the project. So it's important when you come in as a consultant, I think, to really think that through, because a lot of times corporations, managers, they bring you in because they don't really understand all that. They don't always know how to do it. So that's what we're there for, really. I mean, to bring that expertise. So you ask the questions, you say, you make sure that they get that stuff in place before you start. Otherwise, it's just a suffering point later.
Now, you talk about obtaining buy-in, and obviously a lot of that is, the actual adoption of the project, but also contained within a project is obviously the cost. The cost of development, the cost of implementation, and even though there might be a long-term payoff for a project, or, obviously that's why a project is done, right? But with that in mind, why do you think IT and IT projects are largely considered cost-centered or cost centers rather than sources of revenue or capital?
Well, that's an interesting question. I think there's a lot of organizations that see infrastructure or see IT as just something that should work and really, shouldn't be heard from. So the better off it is that they're not heard from, the better off the company and sometimes the business thinks that everything is going. But to me, there is that part. There is the utility part where it should always come on and work. But the rest of it is the value around innovation and around understanding everything now is technology, right? I mean, I think everybody knows that. Whether it's from your devices or down to buildings and IP enabled lighting all the way through security. So if those considerations aren't taken during the course of building something out or implementing something, then that's where the miss is. And it takes a certain capability to get to the table there, besides the business just wanting you to make things run and cost less, right? Yeah. So, to me, that's the biggest, one of the bigger challenges that organizations have, because a lot of them can get by and run the operations, but that's about it.
Are there any tips or techniques you can recommend as far as dealing with management, upper level, C-suite, with getting that type of buy-in, both from an adoption and from a cost basis?
So I think it's and I think every IT organization does a bit of struggling with getting to the table, and it depends on your business, to be honest with you, because some businesses really just care about operations running. But let's assume that there's a certain percentage of them that really need IT and technology to be that partner. To me, there's a couple ways to go about it, but I've always found that the best way, number one, is to deliver the operations. So, if you can make it work as a utility, for a correct cost, that a lot of times that's your entree to the table. But then when you get the entree to the table, you've got to be prepared with understanding your business so that you can understand how to bring technology into and ideas to the table that'll add value to the business, because otherwise then you'll lose even if you got there. So to me, the tips are deliver what you're supposed to operationally, but then have, whether it's on your team or whether it's technology and innovative thought process, but tie it to your business model, right? Because if you don't, it's useless. So, and too often that's missed. I think IT doesn't necessarily understand everything about what the business is intending to do, and so they can't actually have that discussion.
Now, how do you think that an IT executive or IT personnel in general can improve their understanding of the business that they're operating within?
Well, aside from the obvious of getting out there, it's easy to, especially when you're, a new executive, coming in and trying to figure out what's going on. But at the same time, it's almost a parallel exercise, because whoever your voice of the customer is, who you're delivering to, and it can be a number of different levels, right? It's not just, hey, it's Eric. There's a number of different levels in every organization as to who are the people that are really either paying the bills or really going to care about what gets delivered for their business, are the ones you need to get time with. And so I think that's almost equally as important as making sure you set up an environment that's going to run the operations and be successful there and be watchful over cost. So I think that's the key. And if you don't get out and spend that time and do that, while you're having others help you run the other parts of the business, then you're gonna lose out. You're gonna miss out. You're going to recommend things that aren't going to align to really what your business needs. So that's what I would say.
Excellent. I guess the next thing I would ask, it's kind of a question in two parts. It's kind of a forward-looking statement from you. Like, how do you see technology's role in business in general evolving over the next 3 to 5 years?
Well, for me, I think I think I really see, it's back to the question before a little bit. Anybody who's not involved in understanding the business model, the business requirements, everything that's important for that business to grow and be successful, and then understand how to apply technology solutions to it, will not be here. I just don't think they can survive well if they don't do that. So, from my perspective, the technology is moving to, your Internet of Things and having access to everything all the time, and it presents some different challenges. It presents different challenges both from how you handle your consumers, your end users, internal, external, how you give access to your key data to your clients, as well as how you manage that data as it grows and grows. So to me, it's really all around being able to set up a seamless world that connects people to what they need, whether they're clients or they're internal, and have access to that data across any of the devices that they really want to use in some cases. So those are for me, those are the big trends right now, and whether it's how to handle the data or how to handle all of the influx of devices and access ways that users want.
Yeah, I noticed that you have a wearable on. Is that one of the ways that you're positioning yourself toward that outlook?
Well, to me, it's when you're in technology, there's a little bit you always have to have with knowing what's out there. And I can't say that I've gotten this, and it's most recent, but it's more personal, I would say, than it is for anything else. But there's an example. Whether it's your smartphones, your iPads, or your devices today, and being able to have that instant access to all your data and information, it's being demanded not just in the consumer world, but also in the corporate world. How to get things quicker and faster and not have to spend a lot of time on it. Client information around consumer insights, my last company. How to provide clients like Coke and P&G, access to their market information on their handhelds. So as a marketing manager, you can make decisions on the fly, and things like that. That's where it's going. So it's consumer driven, but it's also business driven. So that, to me, if you're not in it, then you're going to get passed by. And again, that applies for any size business, right? This is not just a big corporate organization. I mean, sometimes you have to be more nimble as a small to medium-sized business. So take advantage of those technologies. To me, you can adopt faster. You can, but you've got to understand what you're bringing in order to do that.
What you're bringing in?
Yeah, you got to understand what that. Again, back to your business model. What is that applying? It's going to help you do things faster, more flexibility, get more clients. Those kind of things. The principles are the same to me.
So the technology or the software that you're embracing.
Yep.
I see.
Yep. And how that's going to advance your business and your capabilities, it doesn't matter what size organization.
Now, that being said, how would a company of any size know when it's time to bring in some type of outside counsel for its IT work, either a consultancy or an outsourcing organization, what have you?
Well, to me, usually what happens is either businesses grow, and they might have started small. Then they started to grow, their products or their models started to grow. They acquired something. It's usually those levels of change that also create the need, because very often you at the pace of business, you're just going ahead and doing that and bringing it in and saying, look, great, we bought them for their data in this model, but we really don't have time to integrate them or figure out what to do with them, so we just bring them in and we keep running them. And then after about 6 of those, now you're in trouble, because you never set any standards, you didn't integrate anything, so now you have 6 different models of data. You have to now support all that and provide all that back to the clients separately. So now you get forced to say, we can't keep going like this. And so usually it's things like that. Or it can be different. It can be, we're building a headquarters building. For us, a lot of times that's when we get called in. But what we're trying to do now is help them understand how to transform that, so you don't put a brand new facility in, but then take their legacy voice equipment and everything and just stick it in the new building, right? So how to really think through, I'm going to call it the art of the possible. So you may not take all those decisions, or you may not say we need all this technology, but we help them understand what's possible. And then come back to what is the right thing for their business, back to what I said before, right? Because otherwise it's just technology too.
Fitting with the business model.
It has to.
Excellent.
There's no other way, really.
Great. Yeah. Well, thank you very much, Jeff. I really appreciate you coming in tonight, despite the weather.
Yeah, no worries. I was glad to be here.
We're going to take it... Service management, ITIL. What are your thoughts?
Well, I have a lot of thoughts on that. I think there's a couple things. The first thing I want to say is that because we are talking about a lot of different sized businesses here, is process has to be fit for the business. I know that sounds like a little broken record, but it's very important not to not to overdo or underdo the amount of process you need. But from my perspective, the larger you grow or the more complex your business is, the more you really have to have those processes in place. Example, you have to be able to handle your growing volume of end users. So you have to manage your incidents, and you have to have a central place for your assets and your data. That probably applies to most businesses. I mean, and those core principles have to be put in place and thought about. Otherwise, what happens is your decision making, everything slows down. Your support and resolutions for your clients, if you have external clients, will just slow down if you don't put some attention to the service management and ITIL principles. So, but again, it's process to match the business need, right? Just enough, but enough to be effective, efficient, and hopefully flexible, right? That's really how I see it.
So best practice in defining value in the eyes of the client?
That's a really great question. For us, we use a bit of a methodology, and I'm going to use the term voice of the customer. And one of the things when we come into an engagement that we always do is we figure out who those people are and what levels they are. And it's usually those who are getting services from the people we're working for. And we make sure that as part of the process, while we're trying to figure out how to assess and pull all their data and current state together, that we start going to talk to those folks. Because at the end, unless you marry that with your recommendations, you probably are going to have gaps and you're probably going to miss things. So that's how we do it. Doesn't mean that's always right, but we always do it.
So full and complete business requirements gathering before beginning a project, and what level of importance would you put on that?
Well, it's definitely important, but let me try and give an example. To me, if we're helping somebody transform, or we're helping somebody get from this place to some better place in the future, whether it's half a year, 3 years, whatever that is, it has to tie together. You can't make a business case, to me, unless you actually have real requirements that the business needs, when you get further down the line with implementing. So to me, it's just like the voice of the customer discussion. If you don't go take the time to capture that and figure that out what it is and play it back to the business so they actually say, yes, that's what it is, then somewhere down the road, as you're giving them an implementation plan, you're gonna have gaps and issues, or the CFO and other people are going to go, wait a minute, why are our service levels suffering because you told us we were going to fix all that? Well, we didn't identify what those services are and what level they really need, because the business always needs more than IT can provide anyway. So part of that exercise is to make sure that it matches up as good as possible. And then you're okay, usually, as you go down the path of helping them implement.
So the question is, how do you minimize the disruptive change going forward as a project is brought about and implemented for a client?
Well, one way to do it, depending on the size of the client or the size of the organization, is really to phase. I mean, because there's always a logical way to implement things, if you think about it. And too often it's easy to get pressed by the client, or get pressed by savings, or get pressed by something, and you have to work to control that with them. So to me, one of the best ways to control the pace of adoption and some of those things is to phase in what you do. Because if, like my example before, if you drop it all on them at once, invariably you're going to fail. Because you're going to be backing up to get them to go forward again anyway. So that's an example.
So beyond the resources of your organization, who else are you looking to help deliver solutions to your clients, right? Yes.
That's a good question. I think from my perspective, we have some of the best in certain areas and skills, right? People who can go in and talk at the C-level and help strategize and help pull plans together and methodologies around that. But I will tell you that there's other things that we don't always have in our pocket every day, but are growing pieces and importance in organizations. A couple examples. Security now is front and center with most businesses of all sizes. And even though I own the security part of the practice, I would say, do we have a partnership there to deliver that piece as good as I want it? Maybe not. So there's an example where there's other skills and capabilities and partnerships, because we'll get that sometimes through partnerships versus hiring or whatever that is. So always looking to have some great partners there. We're usually really approach clients with an agnostic mentality. We're there to advise them. We're there to be their advisor, not say, you should go buy EMC storage as an example. So having partners that can actually come in to help provide solutions is important.
Well, so what value would you place on open source technologies, and is there a place for them in the solutions that you assemble for your clients?
The answer is absolutely. And I'll answer it this way. To me, when we work to put a correct strategy together for a particular client, we're trying to make sure that we understand their business model, and we're trying to make sure that those recommendations fit their business model. And depending on that, believe me, traditional isn't always the way to go. In the world today, you have cloud services that are inherent in almost every discussion. Some do it because they don't have the capital to build it themselves. Some do it because they need an actual hybrid strategy where some of their key applications are on premise and some don't need to be. But it depends, and in those cases, you can take advantage of open source just like you can with them managing. It's the build versus buy on the application side. There's no one solution. That's the answer. So depending on that, you try and apply the right solutions.
Great. Thank you. Well, thank you, everybody, for coming. Again, I'd like to thank Jeff Uchida, CS Technologies. Thank you very much for your time.